This week's case is about the Lobster family and their life of freak shows, abuse, and murder. So, let's get started. Hello everyone, my name is Brandy and it's time for a true crime case, mystery, or paranormal story along with one or more of my fabulous felines. It's kind of in the morning, so they've all eaten and they're all sleeping now, but hopefully they'll appear on camera later. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, my feline friends, and a big shout out to my feline fans for helping support this channel. Now, I did put up a short video explaining that I needed a break a couple weeks ago, so I did take the summer off. It was great, and I'm back and ready to dive back into my YouTube channel. I appreciate those of you that reached out to me. In the future, if I'm going to be MIA for a while, I'll do better with communicating with you. I'll put up a community post or something. My husband and I were joking around that if I don't reach out to the audience soon, there will be a YouTube video about me, like what happened to Brandy. I plan to have this video out way before now, but a few things in the last couple weeks took priority. First, remember our 78 Trans Am we bought last year? Well, it had a slow leak in the back tire, and we were usually good about keeping that aired up, and we ordered tires and everything, but, due to the UAW strike, things are really hard to get right now. Well, we got busy and kind of forgot about it, and it went all the way flat. Not a big deal, right? Well, not too long after that, we got a letter from the city saying that we're breaking an ordinance by having an inoperable vehicle in our driveway. The car was not inoperable. She starts right up like a champ, but we didn't want to drive on a rim, right? So anyway, we decided we were just going to move it into the garage to avoid any future, issues in case we couldn't get the tire aired up before we can get the new tires. Well, and that meant cleaning out our garage, which that took a couple days. But in the end, the tire got aired up and we pulled it into the garage. And so no more letters from the city. On a sadder note, I lost a friend in a car wreck a couple weeks ago. We used to work together, and when we both went to other jobs, we kept in touch and we Snapchatted each other often. Like we talk like weekly. That was a gut punch. Wasn't ready for that one. But she loved talking to me about true crime, and she loved more of the oddball, off the wall, weird and unique cases. So even though I had other cases researched that I planned to do one of those today, I wanted to find a really special oddball one and dedicate this video to her. And so that's why we're doing the Lobster family today. So let's dive in. So we are going to talk about the Stiles family that had a genetic disorder called ectrodactyly. It took me forever to know how to say that word, so yay! Now, ectrodactyly is a skeletal malformation of the hands or feet where the fingers or toes are fused together. It can vary in severity, leaving some in a wheelchair, unable to walk, and others it could be just very minor. So the Stiles family was plagued with this condition starting in the 1800s because it is genetic. Grady Stiles Sr. was the third generation of his family that had this condition. Now, back in those times, before political correctness, the condition was nicknamed lobster claw syndrome because the hands would often look like lobster claws. Now, Grady Sr. did not let this condition get the better of him, and he was known as the Lobster Man, and he would be traveling in a carnival sideshow attraction, which was known back then as freak shows as we kind of know it today, right? Now, Grady Sr. Was married and had a great life with his wife, and they ended up having a baby. And Grady Stiles Jr. was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on June 26, 1937. Now, Grady Jr., I'm going to call him just Grady I'll say Grady Sr. if we're talking about his dad, but Grady was born with a severe case of ectrodactyly where it not only affected his hands, but his legs as well, where he couldn't walk. He could not bear any weight on these. So Grady he did use a wheelchair most of the time, but he was able to learn to scoot, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then later he would pull himself around by his arms without the use of the wheelchair. Now, as you can imagine, years of doing this, pulling himself around like that, built up his muscles in his upper body and his arms, and he made him pretty strong in his upper body. So Grady Sr. introduced his son to the carnival life when he was 7 years old, and Grady Jr. became known as the Lobster Boy. So the Lobster Man and the Lobster Boy had a sideshow attraction. Now, the two became very popular as a sideshow attraction, so they eventually were given like a whole carnival act. They just weren't the sideshow anymore. They had their own act called the Lobster Family. And the Lobster Family became one of the most popular carnival acts in the early 20th century. Now, not only were they like this, freak show type person, but they also would educate the guests. Grady Jr., he would hoist himself up on a cushion in the middle of the carnival and welcome people as they were coming in, and his standard line would be, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Lobster Boy. This condition is not caused by drugs or diseases. It just runs in the family." And they would talk to the carnival goers and teach them about this condition. Now, the good thing about their act compared to others in the carnival, as you can imagine back then, is they were not required to do anything humiliating like others may had to do. They would just go around and talk to the carnival goers and collect any tips that the carnival goers would give them. So now we're just going to focus on Grady Jr. So when I say Grady, I'm talking about Grady Jr., okay? So even though Grady's condition was very severe where he had to use a wheelchair, he was pretty self-sufficient. He learned how to write his name and even shoot a gun, which will come into play later. Now, Grady enjoyed the carnival life as the money was actually really good. And he liked his carnival family. He felt, with his people, right? Now, around 1957, however, a young lady had caught his eye, and her name was Mary Teresa. Now, Mary had run away from home at a young age to escape some abuse that was going on in her family. Incest, apparently. Now, shortly after she ran away, she joined the carnival as a staff member. She had a brief marriage with another carnival worker, but the marriage didn't last due to some domestic abuse issues, so they got divorced. Now, Mary and Grady started spending time together, and things progressed from there. And by 1958, Grady and Mary were married. In the next couple years, Grady and Mary would have two daughters, Kathy and Donna. Now, Kathy was born with that family genetic condition, but Donna was fortunate enough to be free of the condition. Now, just like his father before him, Grady took Kathy under his wing, and a new generation of the Lobster Family Act started touring the carnival because, by then Grady Sr. was long retired or passed away. I couldn't find which. Now, when I say the money was good, it was great. Now, this was in the 1960s, and the family was making anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000 per carnival season. If you put that amount in today's money, they'd be making around $400,000 per carnival season. And that's not even working the whole year because they'd winter down in Florida when the carnival wasn't going on. So they had it good and were living a nice, comfortable life. Now, it makes sense why Grady would want his children to continue this legacy, but later, Kathy would come out and say she was actually forced to perform and really didn't like it. Kathy would go on to say that if she wanted to go out on the midway or enjoy other parts of the carnival while she wasn't working, her father would make her wear gloves on her hands so no one was getting a free show of her condition. So, like I said before, the family lived between Pittsburgh and Gibbston, Florida, which was also known as Showtown, okay? Now, Showtown was this small community where most of the carnival workers, or circus people as well, would winter in the off-season when the carnivals weren't going on. Now, everyone figured that the Lobster family just lived a pretty quiet life along with their fellow carnival people, and all was good. However, what people didn't know was that Grady was an alcoholic. Now, this could have been due to his condition, being stared at all these years, being pulled into the life at a very young age. We don't know what psychological damage he was going through. And back then, that wasn't a thing, right? But by this time in his life, he was drinking regularly. Now, Mary, his wife, stated that when Grady drank, he went from being a loving family man to a battering brute who was suddenly racist and very abusive. Being an alcoholic like this will take its toll on your health, as we know now, and your appearance. So Grady, during this time, had actually gained a lot of weight, and that was mainly in his chest area due to his condition. He lost a lot of his hair, and so his appearance was a bit more scary to carnival goers. But he was still an attraction, and a popular attraction at that. So the carnival didn't seem to care much. Now, Grady would start physically beating his wife and children when he drank, so nobody was left out of this. Now, although Grady couldn't walk, he could quickly scurry, lack of better word, across the floor, and he would grab his wife, Mary, around the neck with his claw hands, and he would choke her, and then he would headbutt her because he was limited in his mobility. Mary was able to get out of her first marriage because of domestic abuse, but for some reason, she didn't leave Grady. Money, maybe? I don't know. I wasn't there. But there was one incident that took place in 1973 where Grady had picked Mary up over his head and threw her down to the floor. He then got so mad that he kicked her and the children out of his house and filed for divorce. Now, Mary really didn't have any place to go, especially with 2 children, but another carnival worker would end up taking her in. Now, this carnival worker was named Harry Glenn Newman, and he was known as the world's smallest man, so he was a little person. Mary and Harry would end up falling in love, and they would get married, and they ended up having a son together as well. The son was named Harry Glenn Newman Jr., but they called him Glenn to not get confused with his dad. So Glenn was a regular-sized baby, but he was mentally impaired. Later, as he got older, he had a particular talent, I guess you can say, that fit right in with the carnival and freak show stuff. He would drive nails and ice picks into his nostrils. So naturally, he joined the carnival freak show and was known as the human blockhead. Now, Grady, through all of this, he actually ended up going to court and won custody of his daughters in the divorce because Mary didn't show up to court to fight him. Now, I don't know why he kicked all of them out and then wanted his daughters back, but I assume it was because just the way I've researched this case is he wanted his daughter Kathy back to be part of the shows still, the Lobster Family Act, right? So his 2 daughters are now back living with Grady. Now, Grady, he himself met another woman named Barbara Browning, and they get married. Now, Grady and Barbara would have a son together as well, and named him Grady Stiles III, and he was born with the ectrodactyly condition also. So now Grady had both his daughter Kathy and now his new son involved in the carnival show, which he brought in the son pretty much right away as a baby. So by 1978, Grady's drinking was so bad that he often would drink while he was working at the carnival attraction. He was what we call as a functioning alcoholic to a point, but he would end up lunging at the circus goers and scare them. And he would end up saying like really mean things because remember when he drank, he got racist as well. And so all of that would come out and he wasn't making as much money because why are you going to tip somebody that's insulting you and scaring you, right? So the tips dwindled and he wasn't making as much as he used to. By this time, his daughter, Donna, who was not affected by the family condition, Donna met a guy named Jack Lane, who was a high school dropout, but they began dating all the same. Jack probably wasn't the best guy, to be honest. He would openly laugh at Grady, Kathy, and Grady the Third's condition, and he would call them freaks, and he'd be serious about it. It wasn't fun, poke fun, he was mean. So naturally, Grady did not like this Jack guy. Now, regardless of Jack making fun of her family, he would end up asking Donna to marry him, and she said yes. Grady flew into a rage when he found out, and he actually forbade Donna from ever seeing Jack again, let alone marrying him. However, Donna was not about to be taken away from her true love, and she and Jack actually ran away together. Now, after a few weeks, Grady soon found out that the two were staying in the next town over at Jack's sister's place. Now, Grady called Donna up there and told her to come home now or he was going to come get her and beat the crap out of her and then kill Jack. Now, at this time, Donna was desperate, right? So Donna told her dad that she was pregnant. And so that's why they had to get married. She then threatened that if Grady didn't give his blessing to them, that she would run away even further and he would never see her or the baby ever again, his grandchild, right? Now, here's the thing. Donna wasn't really pregnant when she said this. She was lying. She was just desperate. And she wanted her father to agree to the marriage so this whole fighting stuff would stop. So Grady, thinking his daughter's pregnant, relented and stated that he'd rather see them two married than living in sin together. So he gave his blessing and told her to return and he would take care of the wedding plans. So Donna and Jack returned and started planning their wedding. Grady is still verbal about not liking Jack and not wanting Jack to marry his daughter. So Grady would regularly threaten Jack's life in front of everyone, and Grady and Jack would constantly be at each other's throats. One day, Grady even took Donna to a pawn shop one time where he bought a .32 caliber revolver, and he joked with Donna that he was going to use this gun to kill her fiance. Now, a couple of days before the wedding, several friends witnessed Grady pulling a gun from his wheelchair that he apparently was sitting on and pointed at Jack and stated, "I will kill you before you marry my daughter." Jack just walked away because at this point, that's what they did. They just fought with each other and threatened each other and everything. So everyone just kind of shrugged their shoulders because they figured it was just another fight between the two men. It kind of became a regular thing. So, however, Grady wasn't kidding. The night before the wedding was to take place, Grady had asked Jack to come to his place for a private talk. Now, Donna did not want to let Jack go alone because she wasn't sure what her father was going to do, so she came along with Jack and they both showed up at the house. But Jack went inside alone and Donna stayed outside on the porch waiting for her fiance. Now, Donna overheard the conversation from the porch where her father told Jack, "You got her now, don't laugh about it." Jack couldn't help himself and he smirked and stated, "I told you I would get her." Grady flew into a rage, as normal, pulled the gun from beneath a couch cushion he was sitting on, and shot Jack right in the chest. Jack didn't fall, but instead turned to escape the house, and Grady shot him again in the back. Jack was able to stumble outside where Donna ran to him and held her fiancé while he was dying. Grady appeared on the porch and, while smiling, told Donna, "Better him than me. I told you I was going to kill him." Donna's only response to her father was, "I will see you in your grave," before she ran down the street to call the police. When the police arrived, Grady put up no resistance and told them, "Take me. I'm ready." Donna never had anything to do with her father again after that and left. In 1979, Grady went to trial for the murder of Jack. As you can imagine, Grady was a celebrity at this time, so the media jumped all over this. Now, witnesses were called to the stand, which included other carnival goers that were witnesses, like the bearded lady, the fat lady, stuff like that. During the entire trial, Grady showed zero remorse for what he did for his actions, and he openly admitted his guilt. "Yeah, I shot him. So what?" He wasn't hiding anything. Here's the kicker, though. Grady knew that at the time there was no prison in the country that was equipped to handle his physical disabilities, along with his mounting medical issues. See, Grady had been diagnosed with acute liver cirrhosis from his drinking, and then on top of that, he had emphysema from his years of smoking also. So Grady would be convicted of third-degree murder. How they dropped that down, I don't know. But his sentence was very lenient. See, Grady was right. There was no prison in the country that could or would accommodate him in his disabilities. So his sentence was house arrest and 15 years of probation for murdering his daughter's fiance. Oh, it gets better, guys. So Grady returns home to serve his house arrest, for however long that was, and he continued his drinking and abusing of his family. Now remember, he was still married to Barbara, his second wife at this time, and he would tell his family, like, "I killed before and I got away with it, and I will do it again." So that was a common threat that he would tell his family. And he was, egotistical about it, like, "Ha, I got away with murder." So eventually Barbara got fed up with Grady, and she would end up leaving and divorcing him. However, for whatever reason, again, don't know if it was Grady's status or what, but Grady the third, the son that Grady and Barbara had together, stayed with his father, did not go with mom. So after Barbara left him, Grady, I don't know, he sobered up and he began trying to actually turn over a new leaf suddenly. I don't know if he really loved Barbara and this kind of woke him up, but, he started getting better. He wasn't drinking anymore. So Grady's first wife, Mary Teresa, she still lived close by because she was married to the world's smallest man, right? And they still lived in that Showtown area. And so, he was able to start talking to her again. Mary was glad to see Grady's progress on, being on the wagon. And the two, started co-parenting with their children and stuff. So, they were friends again. Until one night, Grady would admit to Mary that he still loved her and he would like another chance. But, Mary was, of course, hesitant due to everything that had happened to her. Grady would go on to promise Mary that he was done drinking and it would never be like it was. He's turned over a new leaf. He's a new man. Mary would end up divorcing Harry in 1989, and she would remarry Grady. Mary would admit later that she was still in love with Grady, that she always was in love with Grady, that when Grady didn't drink, that was the man she fell in love with, that Grady was actually a great family man. He was an upstanding citizen. He was very kind. And that's the Grady she fell in love with and who she was seeing before her eyes now. Unfortunately, after they were married, about 2 weeks after the wedding, Grady fell off the wagon again. So all the promises that Grady gave to Mary were broken when he started drinking again. And when he started drinking, of course, it was followed by abuse, physical abuse. Now, Mary would state that Grady was worse in the off season when they were wintering in Florida and the carnival wasn't going on, because she felt he didn't have thousands of people adoring him, so he filled that void with alcohol. Now, 3 years after their remarriage, Mary decided she had enough, but she wasn't planning on divorcing him. So again, it's like, why aren't you leaving by yourself? But we're not there. We don't know the circumstance. In October of 1992, the family had come back from touring and was settling down in the Florida home for the off season. Grady would start drinking double shots of Crown all day with a splash of Coke for flavor. Even from his bedroom, he would tell the family that he would eventually kill them all. One night, Grady sexually assaulted Mary, choked her, and tried to smother her with a pillow. Grady eventually passed out, and Mary went out to the living room to sleep to get away from him. That's when she said a couple hours later she was woke up and Grady was on top of her holding a butcher knife to her throat. She said he made the motion of slitting her throat and told her one day he's going to kill her and her entire family. Then dropped the knife and scooted out of the room. The next month, things got worse. By this time, Kathy, their oldest daughter who had the family condition, had married. Apparently, Grady approved of this husband. And she was just over at her parents' place visiting because, again, they were all in this show town that lived in these trailers and houses. So at the time, Kathy was actually 7 months pregnant. Now, Kathy had to use a wheelchair similar to her father because the family condition affected her legs and feet as well. And she stated that they were just sitting in their living room chatting. Grady started a fight with his wife, Mary, and then he lunged at Mary, and Kathy actually intervened to help her mother. Grady was so upset that his daughter was protecting her mother that he pulled Kathy from the wheelchair and began beating her. Now, this would result in Kathy being rushed to the hospital for emergency C-section because it put her in labor. Now, Kathy would have a daughter they named Misty, who would be born without legs and have the family condition in one of her hands, which would make her the 6th generation of the family to have this condition. Grady would go on to continue to abuse the other children as well, including his son, Grady III. But Grady took most of his frustrations out on Glenn, who was Mary's son with her second husband, Harry. But he did save the worst for Mary. One particular bad night, not that they're all bad, right? But apparently this was bad. Allegedly, Grady forcefully pulled out. I'm going to give you a content warning because I just go, oh. Grady forcefully pulled out Mary's IUD. Okay. Now, if you don't know what an IUD is, it's a birth control method where a T-shaped coil is inserted into the uterus, and it's pretty far up there, and he pulled that out. Ugh. Anyway, it's usually removed by a medical professional, so I'm sure this wasn't a pleasant experience, and it was probably very painful for Mary. So after that night, and I guess that whole month was dealing with Grady's escalating abuse. He just kept getting worse. Mary talked to her son, Glenn, who was Harry's son, and they decided that something had to be done about Grady before he finally snaps and actually does kill someone. Well, someone else, that is. The stories kind of differ, but this is what the final story is in the trial, is that Mary approached her neighbor, who was 17-year-old Chris Wyant. Chris was a sideshow performer as well, so Mary knew him, and Chris apparently had some gang connections. Now, it's a little iffy on what exactly happened here. Either Mary gave Chris $1,500 or she gave it to Glenn, and Glenn gave the money to Chris, but Chris ended up with the money to do something about Grady. So Chris had a friend buy him a semi-automatic Colt firearm. And on November 29th of 1992, Mary made sure that all the children were out of the house and then told Grady that she was going to visit some friends. Grady yelled at her not to be too long and continued watching TV in his underwear and drinking his iced tea that was no doubtedly spiked with something. Now, once she left, she told Chris that Grady was home alone and to go ahead and carry out the plan. Chris walked into the house where Grady had his back to him sitting in the chair watching TV. Chris approached Grady and shot him in the back of the head several times and then walked out. Grady Jr., the Lobster boy, was now dead. So hearing the gunshots and investigating the scene, people called the police to report this, and an investigation began. Several people were interviewed, and the police had many suspects, as it seemed no one liked Grady lately because of his antics. He used to be this adored person, but because of his drinking and abuse, nobody liked him anymore, and everybody had a grudge against him. However, when Glenn was being interviewed, Mary and Harry's son, he broke down and admitted that this murder was actually all planned. Glenn had an IQ of 79. Remember, he was mentally impaired, but police named him as the mastermind behind the murder. And I think they did that because Glenn was the one that gave Chris the money. That's the only thing I'm thinking of. At the trial, everyone involved admitted they were not sad that Grady was gone, that he was dead, that it was just kind of ending this chaos that he was bringing to everybody. Mary testified of the years of abuse that she endured and how she really felt that Grady would eventually kill all of them or kill somebody in the family, even if it was by accident. Unfortunately, the judge in the trial disallowed any expert testimony on if Mary was suffering from battered spouse syndrome or if she was acting in self-defense because of this, because Mary did admit at the time of the murder, she was not being abused, nor was she abused that day that it happened. Now, Grady III, who was 17 years old at the time, testified that 2 days before the murder actually happened, he had to break through a locked door in the house to rescue his stepmother because his father was choking her as normal. Kathy, the oldest daughter, testified as well, saying her father was like Satan himself, a very cruel, very cold-hearted and sadistic man when he was drinking, and he was drinking all the time. However, the court found them all guilty anyway. I'm not saying they should have got off. I'm just saying. Glenn, who was the mentally impaired son, who was painted as the mastermind, got a life sentence, but he would be eligible for parole in 25 years. Chris, the man who actually pulled the trigger, was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Mary was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, and she did try to appeal her sentence. She was unsuccessful in that and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Kathy, the oldest daughter, she was named as a co-conspirator as well, even though she admitted like she had nothing to do with this. She knew nothing about it. You know, the charges were eventually dropped on her, so she did no prison time. So now cut to 2014. Grady the third, who was Barbara and Grady's son, had spoken out about this whole murder plan, and he felt that it was a huge misunderstanding. He stated what he thought actually happened was that Grady and Mary that day had gotten in a fight per usual. After the fight was over and Grady had left the house or whatever, Mary had made the comment, just in general, something had to be done. And what he stated is that Mary was just like, I have to do something. Somebody has to do something. I have to call the cops. Like, something has to be done. Not necessarily let's murder the guy. Glenn, Mary's son from Harry, overheard Mary's comment, and he was the one that went to Chris, the 17-year-old, and told him something had to be done. Glenn thought he was telling Chris to go scare his dad or to beat him up or somehow make him see that he was going to lose his family if he kept this up. You know, because losing Barbara obviously had an effect on him why he stopped drinking. But apparently Chris took the meaning of something more permanent, like just take him out. So that was Grady the third thoughts on this whole thing anyway, that it was just a whole big misunderstanding that went too far. So Grady was put to rest and buried in Tampa, Florida, and a single bouquet of flowers was on his coffin with a message that read, "From your loving wife." So Mary still loved Grady even after all of this. Only 10 people attended Grady's funeral, and no one would agree to be a pallbearer. The funeral home had a huge issue with this and ended up just having their employees do it because nobody wanted to be a pallbearer for Grady. You know, by this time, Grady was pretty much hated by the community due to his drunken antics. Now, although that same community didn't really sympathize with Mary either, so it wasn't like they were taking sides. They didn't want anything to do with either side of that. They all stated that she could have just walked away. She could have filed for divorce, or she could have killed him herself and not involve the children. So Grady's gravestone just says his last name and the dates of his birth and death. There's no, loving father, anything like that on there. It's just a grave marker. Chris Wyant, who was the trigger man, was released from jail in 2009. He returned to Florida, but lives a quiet life and just stays out of trouble. Mary was released in 2000, and she went back to live in Gibsonton, Florida, the show town. I wonder if she went back to Harry. I don't know. Glenn, who was Mary and Harry's son, unfortunately, he died in prison in 2014. One of his tattoos that he got while he was in prison said, "Forgive me, mother." Grady the third is still a sideshow performer and is married to a woman named Jessica, who performs beside him as the bearded lady. They have a daughter named Sarah, who is not affected by the family condition. Kathy lives in Florida and has her daughter Misty, and has appeared in films such as Sisters, Big Fish, and Firecracker. And she was in the television series Carnival. Grady the third, Kathy, and Misty sometimes travel together and to perform shows called The Lobster Family. They're kind of continuing this family legacy. I have no idea what happened to Donna. I'm sure she never wanted to be associated with this family or anything to do with it. So she just kind of left and she's gone. Unless Kathy and the other siblings know where she's at, they're not saying. So that is the story. That is the messed up story of the lobster boy and his family. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. I will try to show YouTube more of a priority, but I will communicate with you if it's going to be a while before a new video goes up. So hopefully I will see you guys soon, and thank you for being patient with me. Bye!